Good morning. It is 8:25 a.m. on Sunday, December 24th, 2017. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. So, not only is it Christmas Eve, but I also apparently have picked up a cold or something. That's fine. I'm fine. It's fine. But none of that's important right now because it's Sunday and that means it's time to uh, for our rewatch of Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. Today we are focused on season 1, the season we're doing, episode 7. The title is Idolatry, Idolater, I think is the two words. Idolatry, Idolater. This episode probably won't take quite as long to talk about as some of the others have, just because it is light on plot and heavy on action. So it's actually a great episode to watch, but not necessarily as much to talk about afterwards. It is one of the standalone episodes, meaning it does not directly tie into the Laughing Man case. However, obviously, as is the case with this show generally, everything has a lot of thematic connections, even when there's not direct connections. So, the basic plot of this episode is that we've got a South American revolutionary leader named Jarty. And this is a guy that apparently has been targeted for assassination by the United States and Great Britain multiple times, and it's never made entirely clear why. We don't get a lot of hint of the politics of the rest of the world, but we get the sense from the people in Section 9 that they don't especially have a dog in this fight, in the sense of, is this actually a terrorist that must be eliminated, or is he actually a brave revolutionary leader standing up to the enemies of his country, fighting for his people, that sort of thing? It's basically one of those deals where, we could imagine that the truth is somewhere in between. And in any event, this guy has a strange pattern in behavior. In addition to the weirdness of he keeps surviving assassination attempts, he also apparently visits Japan every 5 months and has been doing so for years, apparently. And that's weird, right? So, Section 9 is sort of tapped to say, let's follow him while he's in Japan. Let's find out, if we can, why he's coming. Just because it's, a matter of political sensitivity internationally. So we are introduced to this guy as he's arriving at the airport, and we have, Section 9 on standby to follow him, and they have a behavioral expert who looks at things like his body language, the way he walks. He apparently has the right prosthetics, the way he scratches an arm, even though that arm is also artificial, is indicative of the presence of a ghost, is what they say. And so the idea being, we're pretty sure it's actually him and not just an android that might look like him. The presence or absence of a ghost obviously is something relevant to the series as a whole, especially for someone like the Major, who is fully prosthetic, and the idea of, like, well, what distinguishes someone like that from just being an android? A ghost, in theory. But, and we've had her whisper about ghosts before. But so in any event, according to this guy, this behavioral expert, this is the real deal. And they actually talk a little bit about, the Major and Bato have a conversation about how it's actually still just probability. We brought in this expert to try to narrow the possibility that we might be following another double, but clearly this guy uses a lot of lookalikes, and so we want to try to be sure. So we follow the Section 9 as they're basically just tracking this guy. And they follow him to a high-rise where he's meeting with this high-up local kingpin, and they're still thinking that this seems a little bit fishy because this local drug kingpin mostly focuses on, like, prosthetic and cybernetic versions of drugs, whereas those are not highly used where Jarty lives. So they think that's a little bit of a fishy connection. They're not sure what's going on there. But everything starts to go wrong with just tailing him because apparently, just to a coincidence of poor timing, local drug enforcement police are planning to raid this particular kingpin's place while this guy is there. So Section 9 is now in the very tricky spot of trying to help him escape the police because they don't want this highly politically sensitive individual to get caught up in just a drug enforcement trial. Especially, the idea that if he were to be, say, killed in that event, that's potentially an international incident sort of thing. So they are determined to try to help him escape. Turns out he actually doesn't need that much help. He's pretty handy with that. Although, as we've seen throughout the episode, this guy is kind of a cipher. He really doesn't say anything, and he just kind of acts very stoic and doesn't seem to do anything. He's a total mystery box cipher with no apparent personality, which is, it's a little bit weird. It plays as weird in the episode. But in any event, we get a bunch of action because these cops, who are apparently also kind of corrupt cops, clash up against the cybernetic security forces of the drug kingpin. Lots of people get killed. We have one especially big guy who's kind of weird and crazy and basically punches a guy so hard that it caves his skull in. And there's a lot of fighting. Everyone, Section 9 is in there trying to make sure that simultaneously Jarty does not get caught by the cops, but also does not lose his Section 9 pursuers. In any event, they track him later to a big, sort of, warehouse area. And this is where they lose him a little bit, but they're pretty sure he's in this one little facility, so they split up to look for him. And this is where things start to get even more mysterious, because we discover that Togusa, Bato, and the Major each have their eyes on him, but in very different places. And then the Major actually is forced to fight with one. But as soon as she sort of dispatches him, another one grabs her from behind. And so pretty soon we are discovering there's more than one of this guy and what's going on. And we get more cool action. There's a great shot of Jarty kicking the gun out of the Major's hand. That's just very cool. We get Togusa getting to outdraw one with his revolver and shoot the guy's arm before he can be shot in return. Bato gets some humor as he takes out the drug kingpin, and but everyone's really confused, like, what's going on with this thing. And eventually, when they are able to kind of incapacitate all of the active copies, what they discover is what the Major calls a ghost dubbing device. And we have this very elaborate machine that we see, and it's not explained in a lot of detail in the episode, but it seems that the basic idea is that this guy believed in his people so much that he worried that if he were to be assassinated, then that would be a terrible blow to the morale of his people, and so he wanted to make many copies of himself. and not just look-alike androids, because those, as we saw in the beginning with this behavioral expert, it was too easy for the look-alike, a look-alike android to be spotted as actually a fake and not a real, not the real guy. So he needed something that would be better and that would fool those sorts of tests. Apparently, though, the original died after a couple of these incidents, and so basically the return to Japan every so often is presumably just to kind of check in on the operation where they have all of these clones in tanks. So here's where we get, Section 9 making their own call about this situation. They decide not to tell any of the other countries what was actually going on. And not only that, but they actually allow one of the duplicates to leave and to go back to his country. And the Major kind of reveals that despite being sort of a super cop, secret agent type, she has a soft spot for revolutionaries. And so she talks about the idea of, heroes being, often phony to begin with. And so the idea of, even if it's a copy, that's being recopied in order to keep his people's spirits alive, that's almost better than a real guy who's not what the promise is. And that's an interesting sort of idea, and it ties into a lot of the themes of the show, of this idea of, let's say you have a real thing that lets you down and a fake thing that always provides for you. Which one is better? Is something better inherently because it's real? Or is it more of a practicality black box situation where you go with the one that works for you? And it also obviously ties into some of what we discussed at the end of the last couple of Laughing Man Case episodes, where the idea of copies, and the copies, now there clearly was an original here, but the copies have become something that the original never was. And, so it's interesting. So, like I said, there's, that's pretty much the whole plot of the episode, but we got lots of cool fighting, especially in the high-rise drug kingpin's lair police fight and all of that stuff. So it's good stuff. It's a fun episode. And we'll be back next week to talk more about Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex with a standalone episode 8 called The Fortunate Ones, Missing Hearts. And this is a fun one that I remember. It has a quirky guy in it. All right, so I will leave it there, and I will talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes. If you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas to you. If you celebrate some other thing, then happy whatever holiday that is for you. And I just hope you have a great time, no matter what it is that you plan to do. And I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes. See, I need to not say that and then say other things because it disrupts the whole thing. So, I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.